Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so if you're tuning in right now, there is a very, very high probability that you are carrying around this constant, heavy background noise of stress every single day. You know, the kind of stress that you might not even register anymore because it's literally just become the water you swim in. Today, we're going to look at exactly what that stress is doing. And I don't just mean to your mood, but to the actual physical structures inside your head. We're taking a biological tour of your brain under pressure, and I promise you, understanding this is an absolute game changer for how you view your own daily struggles. Listen to this for a second. You have been stressed for a while now, the kind that has become so familiar you have stopped noticing it. Man, that hits hard, doesn't it? You probably tell yourself, hey, I'm handling it, everybody feels this way, right? But I want to make something incredibly clear right off the bat. This familiar, constant stress, it's not a character flaw. It's not a weakness at all. It is a chemical environment that is physically changing your brain right this very second. And honestly, understanding that architecture is the very first step to getting your life back. All right, so here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the chronic stress trap, shrinking the hippocampus, silencing the prefrontal cortex, supercharging the amygdala, the depression connection, and we'll wrap up with rewiring for recovery. Let's dive right into section 1, the chronic stress trap, acute versus chronic. So, there's a really critical distinction here that most people completely miss when it comes to stress. On one side, we've got acute stress. Think short term, like a tight deadline at work or slamming your brakes to avoid a fender bender. Your stress response spikes, it does its job to keep you safe, and then your body chemistry just goes right back to baseline. That's normal. It's actually beneficial because it sharpens your focus. But then, on the other side, we have chronic stress. This is what happens when the threat just doesn't resolve. We're talking relentless financial pressure, unresolved trauma, a super toxic workplace, or even just constant digital overstimulation. When this happens, your primary stress hormone, cortisol, stays elevated for days, weeks, maybe even years. And this sustained chemical bath, that is what actually begins to physically alter the brain. Which brings us to section 2, shrinking the hippocampus. Or, as I like to think of it, when the past bleeds into the present. Now, your hippocampus is just a fascinating piece of biological machinery. It's the critical brain structure responsible for forming new memories and learning. But crucially, and this is so important, it is responsible for time-stamping your emotional experiences. So in a healthy brain, your hippocampus puts a mental stamp on a painful memory that essentially says, hey, this happened in 2019. It's over. You are safe now. It essentially organizes your life into a coherent timeline.
But here is exactly where the chronic stress trap springs shut. Sustained high cortisol actively suppresses neurogenesis. That's just a fancy word for your brain's ability to grow new neurons, specifically in this region. So over time, it doesn't just mess with how the hippocampus works, it physically shrinks it. Literally. In fact, research published in Nature Neuroscience actually found measurable reductions in the physical volume of the hippocampus in people experiencing chronic stress and PTSD. So your brain is literally losing mass in its memory center. Wild, right?
And in your everyday life, this physical shrinkage is super obvious once you know what to look for. You might notice increased forgetfulness or find it way harder to learn new things. But look at that final point, because this is the most profound effect. Because the hippocampus is losing its ability to effectively timestamp those memories, past painful experiences start feeling perpetually present. Old wounds feel like they're happening right now. The past literally bleeds into the present. So look, if you ever feel like you just can't get over things, please understand this. This is a brain under intense chemical pressure. It is absolutely not a personal weakness. Okay, moving on to section 3, silencing the prefrontal cortex, losing the wise moderator. I want you to think of your prefrontal cortex as your brain's wise moderator. It's the boss handling rational thinking, long-term planning, impulse control, and emotional regulation. In a healthy, low-stress state, this is the part of you that lets you pause, take a deep breath, evaluate a situation calmly, and actually choose a thoughtful response instead of just flying off the handle. Now, the mechanism of action here is absolutely fascinating. Research from the Yale University School of Medicine shows that sustained cortisol exposure actually causes the prefrontal cortex to lose dendritic connections. Dendritic connections are basically the physical branching structures that neurons use to talk to each other. Under chronic stress, these branches just wither away, so the physical infrastructure of your rational mind is literally losing its connection cables. And when those connection cables weaken, wow, the symptoms are immediate. Simple decisions like figuring out what to eat for dinner suddenly feel completely overwhelming. Your patience runs out much, much faster. You might find yourself reacting to minor inconveniences with this surprising, uncharacteristic intensity. And honestly, perhaps the most frustrating part? Knowing exactly what you should do, but just being completely unable to make yourself do it. It's not that the wise moderator has left your brain, it's just that because of those lost connections, its voice has gotten incredibly quiet. Let's look at Section 4, Supercharging the Amygdala, the alarm system in overdrive. All right, get ready because this is probably the most alarming biological plot twist of this entire explainer. While your prefrontal cortex, your rational brain, is busy losing connections and shrinking under chronic stress, your amygdala, which is your brain's threat detection and alarm system, does the exact opposite. Sustained cortisol exposure actually increases the density of dendritic connections in the amygdala, meaning it grows stronger, it gets more sensitive, and highly reactive. So your alarm system is getting louder at the exact same time the rational voice that's supposed to calm it down is getting quieter. Talk about a double whammy. And that biological imbalance creates a really harsh daily reality. It's snapping at people who really don't deserve it. It's lying awake at 2 a.m. catastrophizing over things that aren't actually emergencies at all. It's that persistent low-level dread you feel in your stomach, even when there's no source for it. You might even start misreading totally neutral facial expressions as hostile. Listen to me on this. This isn't anxiety as just a mindset or a passing bad mood. This is a biological state of chronic threat activation. Your brain is scanning for danger because its alarm system is structurally overpowering its rational moderator. Which leads us to Section 5, the depression connection, suppressing brain maintenance. To really grasp this connection, we need to talk about BDNF, which stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Basically, think of BDNF as Miracle-Gro for your neurons. It's this crucial protein that supports the growth, the survival, and the overall maintenance of your brain cells. You absolutely need this protein for a healthy, resilient mind. But here's the kicker. Chronic stress significantly suppresses the production of BDNF. By shutting down this Miracle-Gro, prolonged stress doesn't just feel bad emotionally, it actively creates the neurological conditions where clinical depression becomes highly, highly likely. In fact, consistently low BDNF levels are one of the most reliably documented markers in people experiencing depression. So you see, the biological lines between chronic stress and depression get super blurred because one literally lays the physical groundwork for the other. So after hearing all of this, the shrinking hippocampus, the lost connection cables, the suppressed growth factors, the obvious question we have to ask is this biological damage permanent? Are you just stuck forever with a stressed out, physically altered brain? That brings us to our final section, Section 6, Rewiring for Recovery, the Power of Neuroplasticity. I am absolutely thrilled to tell you that the answer to that question is a massive no. The incredible news here is that the damage is not permanent. The central hope of neuroscience is something called neuroplasticity. The very same mechanism that allowed chronic stress to physically reshape your brain in a negative way, it allows recovery to reshape and heal it in a positive way. Your biology can heal, but, and this is a big but, it requires genuine intentional change. You can't just push harder and hope your brain miraculously figures it out. So here are the exact research-backed steps to reverse this damage. Step 1, you have to reduce your stress load. Setting boundaries, those aren't luxuries. They are neurological necessities. Step 2 is physical exercise. This is huge, guys. Exercise directly stimulates that BDNF, Miracle-Gro, we just talked about, promoting neurogenesis, which literally regrows the exact region of the hippocampus that stress shrank. Step 3, breath work. It actively engages your parasympathetic nervous system, countering that chronic alarm state. Step 4 is sleep protection. Sleep is when your brain clears out cortisol metabolites, so you have to make it a priority. And finally, Step 5, professional support. Trauma-informed therapy is incredibly effective at helping recalibrate your nervous system. In fact, platforms like BetterHelp, which were mentioned in our source material, can actually connect you with licensed therapists to start doing this vital work. I really want you to let this next part sink in. Rest is not laziness.
Boundaries are not selfishness. Asking for help is not weakness. They are the things your brain is genuinely asking for. You are a human being, and your biology was designed for short bursts of stress. You have been carrying a load that was never meant to be permanent. Validating that physical toll, really accepting it, is the very first step to healing.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative question to think about. How long have you been living under chronic stress? And what is just one boundary you can set today to let your biology begin to heal? Seriously, I encourage you to reflect on your own cognitive load. And please share your experiences down in the comments. I think you might be really surprised to see just how many focused learners out there are carrying the exact same weight as you. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you next time.